this session, the focus of our session is on soft enablers. Thank you. Soft enablers for a data-driven economy. And as we can hear from what's out there, the cloud economy is vibrant, very vibrant, and all of us in this room, we are converted, I'm sure, to the potential of what it means to be utilizing the cloud in a data-driven economy. But we must not forget that there are many enablers which are important in order to succeed. And what we would like to do in this panel discussion is to focus on the soft enablers. Now, what is soft? I don't really know exactly, but I think it has a lot to do with people. And our three speakers this afternoon, Andres, Justin, and Eric, have touched on people and other soft aspects in various degrees. And I would like them to address some of these as well in a bit more detail. And if I may just start the conversation going by asking one or two questions. How do you convince those of us, I mean, other than everyone out there and everyone here in this room, how do you convince others who have yet to subscribe or buy into the cloud economy, or to invest sufficiently in securing the data that is moving across the cloud? How do you convince them? How do you sell your value proposition to the business?
Yeah, so I'll jump in. And so a lot of the conversations I have with peers, other chief information security officers in industry, is really around security, and so that's probably the base of my response. I start out actually by identifying the massive insecurity that they're doing and processing that the business is using around data today. The emailing of sensitive data to outside auditors, regulators, contractors, the vast amount of financial data going back and forth to their outside debt holders incredibly insecurely. And what I say is that by re-centralizing that content into a single source across their entire enterprise and doing it in a globally accessible model cloud, I can actually not only solve or dramatically mitigate a significant amount of risk that they have today, but I'm actually able to do it in a manner that they are not. So they're not able to do the integrations. They're not able to create that platform. They're not able to have the partnerships and the advancements across the industry. But as a cloud provider that we have focused on that, we're able to arrive a much better security model than that they're able to. And it's not a matter of, hey, we have smart people and it could be detrimental to our business. That's kind of a silly response. But it's about a shift in the utility of computing back to a centralized management capability that enables this opportunity for a better security model. And we at Box, we choose to exploit that and drive in a better security model, because that's what we believe is a significant differentiator in the business. And as a result of that, that conversation quickly shifts from, hey, is my data secure, to, oh my God, I have a significant amount of insecure environments that I've done today or that we've had for 20 years, and I've always wanted to solve them. Now I see an opportunity for a better environment, and that's the majority of the conversations that I have.
Indeed, that is a very important shift in the conversation. Eric, would you like to add?
I totally agree with what Justin said. I mean, I focus my passion and my time with government. I guess, yeah, I mean, I rather start my conversations always with the owner of the business. I mean, in government, the business, well, the owner of the system, the citizen engagement application, or that area in the government responsible for small and medium enterprises to make them more efficient, give them access to information, etc. I rather start the conversation always with business, and it's a risk conversation, as you said, right? Then once the business understands, hey, how can we mitigate, because you can never eliminate completely, right? Then you translate this to the benefit of hypercloud or cloud computing. Is just economics, right? It's OPEX and CAPEX, and this is just governments, but this conversation works with SMEs, with different kind of audiences as well.
Okay. I would assume that one of the most important things is to be a little bit clear about what kind of risks we are talking about if we're using cloud. It's a very fuzzy statement, risk. Actually, we don't know often what we mean with risk. And also, most people in business just don't know what we mean with cloud. Cloud is not different than any web application. So as long as decision makers are not somehow educated about what is behind this buzzword, there's no much point to discuss. That is one point. On the other hand, business will rather look at the risks not going to the cloud, because there are many economic risks. So there will be basically a mandate to go to the cloud, and it's just a matter of compliance and how we can back up if something is going wrong, what we anyhow don't understand. So it will not be a big effort to go to the cloud. It will be just a change in business paradigm and a compliance issue.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor at this point? Yes, please.
Thank you. I thought all three sessions were fantastic and very good from different perspectives. A lot of the language around risk is very fearful. My question, having all three of you there right now, is what paradigm shift would occur to make the language more positive so that we're not concerning ourselves, but we're enabling ourselves?
Yeah, the conversation of risk in security is a very horrible one because nobody really knows what they're talking about in the vast majority of senses. I mean, we've talked about risk in the security industry from a severity of a vulnerability, and that makes no sense to the business. So for me, and it's not an easy one, and I found maybe 3 or 4 companies in all my travels that have effectively done it, but translating the context of security into the context of business. And so what it means for me is, what is the impact to my revenue stream? What is the impact to my reputation? And what is the impact to the business operations of whatever it might be doing? For tech companies, it could be software developers. For manufacturing plants, it could be the manufacturing line, et cetera, et cetera. But doing that translation, that mapping, is very, very difficult, and it hasn't been standardized. And so to change it from a negative to a positive, I think first, security practitioners need to change the language in which they're talking about from one of technology and vulnerabilities to the context of the business and make that mapping versus expecting the business leader to do it themselves. Because one of the fundamental problems that we have in how companies are insecure is that they've been living in a bubble expecting their internal business executives doing that translation, and the minute that you expect them to think, you're losing the battle. So doing that translation, placing it in a context of business language, having them intuitively understand would allow them to participate in the conversation, and their participation elevates the concept and therefore drives in a better, healthier conversation of security and aligning the business to what the needs are. And I think that's what you're seeing in a lot of very progressive companies today, that it's been a top-down discussion to the board and CEOs around this thing called security, which is driving in outside parties and internal people to elevate their game, to have that conversation with the board around security, around risk in that context, and the maturation of security is coming along with it. And there, as a result, driving the business itself into how we make strategic decisions from a business sense and incorporating that risk discussion. So I don't know if I went to your point, but I think it's a more holistic shift that we need to have a better conversation around risk.
Okay, may I add on what you just mentioned? This shift in language. What is risk? Actually, in 2009, there is a standard published called ISO 31000. And this gives a very shocking definition about what is risk. It's totally breaking with all what we understood before. Traditionally, we say something like an event happened and the impact. Yeah? Or in IT security, a vulnerability a threat exploits a vulnerability, leads to an event, and something happened. But the definition in 31000 is basically risk is the effect of uncertainty on achieving objectives. This is a radical change, and I've never met any IT specialist who have any idea about what that means in the context of IT security. And as long as we don't use that concept and massage it in the context of IT security, we will never link IT security to business risk, and that means we will never appropriately address that to the business itself. And as long as we equate information security with IT security, we will never get to the point. We're protecting IT and separate it from the information. We are in our language still at the data level, or at 0 and 1s we're talking about it. But especially cloud, which basically enables business processes, needs a different risk concept.
Eric?
Well, just to probably add something to what you said. Again, I think it's understanding the business outcomes. It's very important. I think we never stop and we don't listen that much. We just jump into conclusions immediately. You have to go to the cloud. Wait a second, why I have to go to the cloud? I mean, sometimes it's an easy conversation if you're looking for scalability, for example, in a government, because there's no other way that in your data center you can provide a kind of access or information, resilience, etc. But sometimes it's not that easy. Again, I think that going back language, understanding your business outcomes is critical before we start the technology conversation.
Yeah, I'll probably jump in again. I don't believe, well, the conversation of financial risk analysis within businesses is actually pretty horrible. An audit committee goes and does a questionnaire every time of the year saying, what are the top 3 things, SVP, EVP of this business that you're worried about? And then it gets prorated and that drives the risk model. I mean, that's a pretty atrocious model of how to identify financial risk or business risk within a company. It's not data driven. It's not properly managed. And so the maturity level of risk as a general sense is fundamentally pretty bad within most companies. And then to try to take a deeply, highly fractured, highly specialized concept like security and then apply it into a risk language that's already immature to begin with, it's fraught with failure. And so what I think we dramatically need is an elevation and a maturity of risk itself, regardless of the context within businesses. And so when you look at an enterprise risk management model that includes competitive analysis, includes technology, includes financial risk, includes a lot of other things, therefore we need to have a much better model within companies, and more data driven than what we have before. I don't believe that we need to have a different risk model for cloud providers. We just need to have a good one, and we don't generally. Most companies don't even have that.
Okay, let's pick on this for a minute and discuss, if you don't mind just holding your question, the challenges of understanding and communicating risk and benefits of cloud and security, and one of my hypotheses is that it has a lot to do with the amount of training that we have had, or the amount of exposure that we have had, both on the IT side and on the business side. So in terms of skills development and education, do you see some critical areas whereby for yourselves, for your employees, as well as for your customers, they need to upgrade or upskill themselves?
In regards to security education? Yeah, I would probably say one of the things that we need to do in industry is educate employees, and including the security practitioners, better. What we do is we set up a 1-hour, once a year webinar or training, and we expect them to actually, care, let alone learn. And so what we really need to have, and this goes back to more of an Edward L. Bernays and more of a organizations and the psychological contract shift, and I focused a lot on this particular problem in my years at Symantec, where how do you incorporate the conversation of security on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and how do you attach it to something that's relevant and actually emotionally driven for the employee? And so what we did is we shift the conversation to this could damage the business to this could damage our customers. and let's bring out some of our customers, whether it's a children's hospital, and talked about security impact that could affect the children in the hospital. And what that would do is every employee would sit there and say, I don't want to have a child dying because I didn't do my job. That matters to them. Or how do we, during when kids go back to school, start driving in articles or pamphlets to employees saying, here's information on how you can educate your child on staying safe online, or how to go shopping more securely. Those skill sets come back into the company, but you message it out in a manner that's relevant to them and they care. And so as we do that and drive a large sense of transparency in how we engage the employee base, we had a dramatic shift in how employees not only perceive security as a concept, how their behavior of security, and also how they perceive the security team as a whole. So I think there's a much more significant, dramatic change that we need to have in education to really shift the culture of a company.
Thank you. Eric, Andres?
Well, I think I mentioned that we need fewer people telling other people what to do, right? And more people capable of doing what we need to do. I'm looking here at the kind of skills that we're requiring now with these modern technologies and cloud computing, and we need new skills. I mean, and that's part of the education. We have to develop and acquire sometimes new talent to build the right teams and discipline. So it's as long as the employee doesn't understand the value of data, it's hard to create a data-driven culture, right? Because you want to empower your employee to find the right data. But if he doesn't understand the value of what he's doing or the responsibility, right, it comes as part of the empowerment, then it's very hard to change the culture.
Andres?
I think we need to change the perception of risk management. Risk is always perceived as something negative. Actually, doing business means nothing more than risk management. If you don't want to manage risk, you cannot do a business. So a risk is nothing bad, and the purpose of a risk to be managed. And the risk management doesn't mean avoidance of risk. It means understanding the risk, identifying, name it, speak it, analyze it, and make a treatment decision, which can be very simple as accepting the risk knowingly. And then to name a risk should not be associated with blaming somebody. In an organizational setting, if I name a risk, I name a person in charge for that department. If there is a risk, then the next level will blame him and will very simply say, you don't manage well because there's a risk. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of the risk concepts, and I think a good leader at the top understands the risks as a business necessity. If any successful business is based on a proper risk management in a wider sense of accepting risk knowingly and minimizing the impact if something is going wrong.
Thank you. We have a question from the gentleman.
Thank you, Chairman, sir. Justin, I think that due regard and respect, I think as the catalyst and evangelist, I thank you very much for your affirmative deliberation on wanting to raise such very, very important matter. And it's long, long overdue, as you know. 2 decades is passing through without real action. So, particularly with regard to your, the spirit and terms of your letters of your terms of reference, the question of security's transformation is very much a transition which is not forthcoming because the transformation is yesterday's proposition in the 21C. We would expect a transvention kind of thing, and it's not coming. And what you're trying to propagate is right. Now, my question is that when you look into one aspect, when you talk about control-wise, the question of not standard yet, but standpoint is not forthcoming. You see, the algorithm isn't there at all. You can see the vision, but you know the unknown, but the others do not care about what you seem to know, that the unknown factors. Now, if you notice, not to mention about Hillary's situation or the other. My point here is the question is that, you see, the point of the 4 dimension in terms of administration, authority-wise, when you talk about regime, when you talk about regulatory, when you talk about responsibility, when you talk about the issues of rationale, it's not forthcoming. The question is that there's no white paper, there's no nothing that explains what exactly it is. So what you cover, the landmines, is within the landscape, is fantastic. Why can't you propagate it stronger than that? Because we have been looking for it, because I'm saying one thing. As consumers, away from the vendors' landscape, the consumers, they were completely unprotected. Why? Because it's always defense, full defense, 100% defense, no counter defense allowed. FCC do not allow it. I tried 30, 40 years ago. Thanks a lot.
Okay, what's your question?
My question is that you do not want to put into writing the basis.
I'm going to answer the question.
Beyond the form.
Yeah.
What is the substance that you want to go for? Likewise, when Eric was saying very well, but opportunities must be regarded as challenges. It's not just opportunities. It is challenges. So the question is that's exactly it. What we saw is only form, no substance. That's the basic thing.
There's a lot in there. So I think, one, the break between consumers and enterprise is very different. We're not going to have a shift in security for consumers until we have a generational shift within the users of those services. So, for instance, when I look at my daughter, who's 13, versus the 30-year-olds and 25-year-olds of today, it's a very different concept of privacy. Within the U.S., I'm being very specific. It's very private, very secure concept when you talk to my daughter, versus you're not going to find that in previous generations. And so I do believe that this concept of security/privacy will not come about within the cloud services outside of anomalies, right? But as a general sense, until we have that rotation of the users of those services, and that's going to be more generational. On the enterprise side, on the business side, it's edicted down. So it's really about risk. It's really about thought of how we protect our data. It's really about, if we get compromised, the reputational risk outside of that. The reason why I say it's opportunity for cloud providers and companies using those cloud providers is that the same concept with seatbelts and brakes. If you're intelligent about what you do and how you do it, you can move a lot faster without a lot of damage. Now, there's only so much propagating of that message within the industry, but what I am seeing is that where there's a few of us that have been very proactive early into saying, how do I be proactive in solving security problems, we're winning in the market, making a differentiator on that basis alone. For a year or 2 year downstream on a feature functionality capabilities. What we're starting to see now is the rest of the market start to become aware of that differentiation, of that competitive advantage on security itself, and are starting to adapt. And so that is going to eventually shift a lot of the enterprise cloud providers into a better model, but it takes a long time. And so if we look forward on Internet of Things, which is the next evolution, that'll take another 6 to 7 years, I believe, and it will have the same sort of effect. You could actually win in the market if you predicted this model and able to drive it in.
Okay. I think this conversation has to go on. There's a lot more that we need to share and learn from one another. I would want to encourage you to continue to engage the speakers while they're still here this afternoon, and continue to learn and experiment, and most importantly, adopt the cloud solutions for your company, for your business partners, for your customers, and to share the benefits and to manage the risk of a data-driven economy. Time's up. Thank you very much for the attendance or your attendance in the panel session, and I wish you a good afternoon. Thank you.